Hey, what's up, guys? Thomas Edwards, founder of The Professional Wingman, where we help high-performing achievers live iconic lives. And I want to welcome you to The Professional Wingman podcast. Excited to be here with you guys. I'm excited for my guest. He is a longtime friend, and he's also a former client who has a success story, but we'll get into that and much more. I feel like this guy it doesn't need an introduction, but I've tried to figure out a way where I can really introduce him because he's a very accomplished individual and he's very humble. And so hopefully he enjoys this. And I want you to be inspired by his story, what he's up to, and just learn some special things that he's teaching kids, which is near and dear to my heart, as some of you guys know about my mission of leaving a legacy of leaders here. So my kid and potentially future kids can be able to live the life that they're meant to live. So without further ado, I want to welcome, I wrote this down, a true Titan, a Titan of collegiate volleyball. His coaching career spans over 2 decades, almost 3. And he's not just a coach. Just having met some of his kids that he's worked with and has trained and has pushed, it's clear that he's that guy, a beacon of excellence, dedication, and transformative leadership. His name is Craig Kolek, and he, at one point, was the mastermind behind Rivier University's volleyball programs, and he has achieved what few in the realm of sports ever do. He has over 1,000 combined career victories in both men's and women's volleyball. And his unparalleled success is marked by a profound commitment to developing his athletes holistically, ensuring that they don't only excel not only on the court, but in life. Now, when he joined Rivier in 1997, he's built himself a legacy, and he guided his teams to 22 conference championships, numerous NCAA tournament appearances, and he's the first in NCAA history to reach over 400 wins coaching both men's and women's teams, a testament to his versatility and strategic genius. 6-time GNAC Coach of the Year and Hall of Famer. His influence extends far beyond victories and titles, and his philosophy, rooted in character, family, dedication, and tradition, has molded countless athletes into champions both on and off the court. He is also the founder of, I want to make sure I get this right, Coach Craig Kolek Performance Training. And so without further ado, let me bring out my man, Coach Craig. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up, man? Thank you for that.
Yeah, man. I for someone who has built the accolades over your career, I wanted to come up with a little something that just allowed you to bask in that,
Yeah. It's still humbling to hear, but it's pretty awesome to digest.
Yeah. It's awesome, man. I mean, you're a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
What was, I want to start there because, when you're acknowledged for the career that you've created and, are still doing, right? Like, how did it feel to be acknowledged at that level? I mean, I guess, would you consider that the highest level, the highest achievement, or what?
For an individual feat, it's a great level. I think for me, just the relationships that I have with my athletes, that's the ultimate level. Like seeing where they're at, like that's my legacy. Like that's seeing what they're doing in life right now and keeping up with them as alumni. And all the great things they're achieving, like that's the pinnacle for me. The Hall of Fame is awesome. I'd be lying if I said I knew it was going to come at some point. It just kind of happens, right? You understand your numbers and your legacy a little bit. It was still an awesome experience, and it's still humbling to be a piece of that because there's not many that get to achieve that. And I can tell you, I worked for it. So it was deserved from my eyes as well, and I do take that in as something that I hold close to my heart for sure.
Yeah, I last night I was doing some research because I was curious to know like how many coaches in NCAA history have had over 1,000 wins. Like there
Yeah.
are like, there's a lot of coaches who coach like in the history of NCAA,
Yeah.
but there's a lot. I forget the number that came up. I think it was less than 50.
It's not a lot for NCAA, and even somebody had sent me something as well as NBA coaches, because NBA plays a lot of games, right? Even NBA coaches, there's not many that reached that number as well. So that's like
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Like less than, in fact, I mean, so I actually pulled up the tab, right? As of 2024, there are 43 coaches across all NCAA divisions who have achieved 1,000 wins.
Yeah.
43. So it's amazing. I just because I feel honored to know. I know you are the third 1,000-win person coach that I actually have had the joy to connect and work with. The other two, Herb McGee, who has well over I think 1,200 wins at this point, and Tom Shirley, who was the maybe still be the women's basketball coach at Philadelphia University, now Thomas Jefferson University. And so I got to work and learn under those two just geniuses
Awesome.
over my time there too. So it's a big feat, man. So congratulations. I didn't really get to say that to you when it happens, congrats. But
thank you, brother.
Yeah, man. So let's go back. Let's go back to even before win number one, right? Like, how did we start that journey? When did you realize that, man, you know what? Like, I have this knack of bringing kids together for this particular mission and feel like you can do that successfully.
It's funny. I started coaching just for the money. I mean, coaching, you don't make money, right? But I started coaching for the money because I was traveling myself, trying to play professionally for beach volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up a part-time job at the university just to coach the men's team at that time. And after one season, I just got bitten by the bug. It was an awful season. Like it was, it was soccer players. It was not volleyball players. It was just a bunch of mishmash kind of group. And it was still an amazing experience. So as that went on, I realized like the connections that I was able to make just with that group was really something that hit home for me. And it's funny because I still, the very first team, I'm still in touch with 3 of those 7 guys. There's only 7 guys on the team. So I'm still in touch with 3 of those guys. So my relationship started all the way back to 1997 with this group. And then once I was with the men for about 3 years. And once I was successful or starting to build something with them, the school made me full-time with the women as well. And then that just totally really hooked me, just to be able to have both relationships. And the thing that made us really successful was the fact that it wasn't the men's team and the women's team. It was the volleyball team. And it was 40 of us all together at once, all sharing the same passions, the same goals, supporting each other both ways in both seasons. And so for me, it was that family atmosphere. I'm very close knit with my family, and that's what I tried to include in my program. And that's what really made it hit home for me and extremely powerful for the program itself to really kind of blow up.
It's awesome. I think for when I'm listening to the story, I think what I noticed is when you talked about the connection with the kids, right? And kind of the journey that they went on. And I'm sure you witnessed a lot of transformation in there. I mean, imagine bringing a bunch of athletes together to play a sport they may have never played and have that experience. But what was it about the connection with the kids that became so important to you that became the main mission?
You see the passion in them. You see them wanting to learn, and they're sponges, right? They just want to get better at what they do. They're driven. And so I knew I had the goods to be able to help them. And I was young coaching then. I just knew I had the playing chops to be able to help them. So that's how I started, was just, I knew what I was doing as a player, so I just tried to incorporate it. And then I started learning more as a coach as I went. But that passion and their drive and it from that first team all the way to this past year's team, it's the same. Like they want to accomplish great things. And I know that I can help them do that. And a lot of that piece is the mental piece as well as the skill piece.
Yeah.
So it was for me that it only makes you want to do more. You see that passion, that drive they have, like you just want to like not let them down. You don't want them to be average. And that was my goal.
Yeah. I love that, man. I love that. And, even when we had first met, like I knew that was part of the mentality that you had that you brought on to them. Right.
Yeah.
Now, when we worked together, there was some hurdles that we had to overcome as well, particularly in the dating space. Right. And so how are you able to apply, that mental model, right? The kind of the idea of figuring out the knowledge, developing the skill, right? Bringing out the talent, which is inherently your DNA, but then getting over the mental obstacles that had held you back from succeeding in that realm.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I took from you, and I didn't really digest this immediately at the time. Mm-hmm. It was more maybe a year or two later where I really kind of sat back and thought about things, about what we did together.
Yeah.
And then also what my athletes are doing. And it was a 3-phase approach. It was awareness, it was strategy, and it was action.
There you go.
Right. And so how do you, in that strategy, that 3-phase strategy, how do you improve performance as an athlete? That's it.
Yep.
Then looking back at it, that's the same thing I did with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so, which is awesome, right? Yeah. And it actually worked out, right? You end up meeting the love of your life, and
I'm happily married now. Have a 5-year-old, almost 5-year-old son. He's telling me he's 5, but he's still got a couple of months left.
Yeah.
It's
they will always want to be older than they really are, and you're like, no, stop! Like I need you to be the age that you are.
Please stop.
Yeah. I love that. So you said awareness, strategy, and then action, right?
Action, yeah.
So this is something that I talk about with my clients these days. It's very similar, just different words, right? It's vision, strategy, and then execution.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt. So for me, I actually changed action to elevate because I think you need to take action on the first 2 anyways.
Yeah.
But after you get those first 2 down, we want to elevate to your performance. So anyways, sorry, didn't mean to.
No. That's perfect because it actually segues perfectly into like my next question, right? And so when you have a variety of different student athletes who come in, right? Like when I mean like a variety, I mean of talent level and foundational skill level. How do you determine how to set up that 3-phase process for each of them?
Ooh, that's a good question. The biggest thing that I've always told my players is that if you're willing to be part of something that's bigger than them, which means that every decision that they have is going to affect 40 other people, I can take their game to whatever level they want to work towards. So what needs to happen, though, is they have to be involved in the culture of it.
Yeah.
And generally with the culture, it's already set in stone because I've been around for so long with the program. But when I'm helping other coaches in other programs, we develop a culture that allows the athletes to build it themselves.
Yeah.
So they have more investment into it, right? They have more vested as far as what they want it to be. That means they're going to give more to it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of for that piece. That's how we do it. And the skill wise, it's you see who's hungry, you see who wants it more, and those are the ones that are coming for extra work and are doing the extra things and don't need their hand held. They're driven, and the other ones need to learn that, whether it's from me or by example, but from their leaders.
That's so good, man. So there's like 3 pieces there that we can like kind of expand on. The first one, make sure I get it right, is what was that first part you said? I had it just on my tongue.
Is it the culture piece?
Nope, it was before the culture piece. Man.
Yeah, sorry. So if they want to be bigger than something, they're gonna be part of something bigger than themselves.
Yes, right. So that's actually huge. It's much easier to see that in a team dynamic, right? Because you're immediately surrounded by like your peers and your teammates. And the idea is collectively you guys are galvanizing towards a particular goal. How does one use that frame, that particular frame, if they are kind of on their hero's journey, if you will? Let's call it a hero's journey, right? A little bit more on the solo side. How does one apply that mindset in that way? Because that's really powerful, because I do believe that the things that people do, whether they're doing it on their own or with other people, has that type of impact. This is how we start to create legacy, and we build a body of work that impacts more beyond ourselves. But how do we adopt that now to begin the process or change or start that initial push towards it?
I'm a big believer of now, and especially, after our first meeting together 13 years ago and kind of moving forward, it's about the action piece. Mm-hmm. And so if they can communicate what they're trying to accomplish, what their vision is, what their goals are, then I'm going to help them piece together a plan that's going to work for that hero's journey. It's going to work for them. And it's a lot of work in a team, because you're talking about putting together 15, 20, 25 different hero journeys that are all at all different phases. Some are a little more advanced, some are a little bit behind, but it's all the same thing for each person. Yeah. So for me, it's that action piece. What are you looking to do for your vision? What's your goal? And then let's set it in course and take some action on it. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome there from them. And really, how do you get rid of that? You take action. So you just constantly just telling them to you got to take action and be motivated in doing it. From a team perspective, I've found that the more you communicate, this is like anything, culture and leadership 101, communication leads to that trust, and that trust leads to connection. And the more connected you are, the more commitment you're going to get. So the more you can communicate with, especially with today's athletes, the more you can communicate with them, the more they're going to buy in, the more and the more commitment they're going to do for you and for the program and for themselves too. And once they see that, it's going to take off more.
Yeah, I love that. Because all that in a very simple way is that you're constantly showcasing your belief in their abilities to meet the potential that they see in themselves.
Yeah. Yep. Coaches, yeah. I've used this. I actually used this in my Hall of Fame speech, and I had a lot of people comment on it. But the short of it is, I think coaches are basically the blind spot mirror in your car, if you have one in your car, right? Yeah. Coaches basically point out the blind spots in you. What you can't see, that's what a good coach does. He brings that out. He points it out to you, and you got to be willing to take it. Whether it's, good or bad, like, hey, here's what you need to get better at and work on and be better about for you to get to that next level. So yeah, blind spot mirror is exactly what you're saying.
That's a good one, and it's so true, because we only have so much awareness with the two eyes that we have. But when we have an extra set of eyes whose sole job or purpose, if they're really good, is to see all the things that you can't. Yeah. Now you have a greater awareness that can be brought to you at any given time. It's kind of like, a coach. I like to use this analogy. I've been using it a lot lately. A coach is walking towards the locker room at halftime, right? And before he heads down the tunnel, he's looking back to see the scoreboard, see how they're doing. They might be up, they might be down at the half, right? But that doesn't tell the whole story, right? That's the story that everyone else sees. And that might be the story that your team is focused on. But as you're walking towards the locker room, you're also getting a stat sheet. And that's where the analytics show up, and you're starting to see, okay, cool. Like there's something here that's telling us what we're doing well, what we need to do better. And by the time you get to the locker room, you know exactly what you need to say to get your team to do that in the second half. Great coaches are able to do that. They don't just look at the scoreboard. They look at what's going on behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a good analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love that, man. And I love you talked about, culture, what would be like what's a good example of that, right? Like, how do you, as a coach, or if you're just an individual, how do you establish your own culture? Like, we could talk about it from a team perspective. Maybe that's a much easier example to give. But how do you apply that to yourself? Because I believe every person individually has their own culture, right? Now, I do understand that, culture is essentially a personality that's scaled across multiple people. That's my understanding of it. And it starts with action, right? Action breeds habit, habit breeds lifestyle, lifestyle creates personality, and then a personality that scales breeds a culture.
Nice.
Yeah, but how does one start? What are some maybe strategies or anecdotes that you've given that has kind of created a culture with some of your teams or coaches that you've worked with?
Values. What are your values? Like, that's your personal culture. So if you don't know who you are and what you want, then that's what you need to figure out to know what your culture is going to be. So I use this example. Urban Meyer, I actually stole this from him. He uses a thing called above the line and below the line for teams. And so once you have a team culture, is your actions as an athlete above the line for that culture or below the line? So did you go out and party? Is that above or below instead of hitting the weight room, right? It's below the line, right? We want to try to have all of our actions above the line as much as we possibly can. So as an individual, knowing who you are is going to make you live your life with purpose, and at least be driven towards that North Star with those values and those principles that you have. That will be the direction that you want to go. You can always adjust them, because you might pivot, like, okay, I have a value of this, this, and this, but now I want to change one of them. But if you're living by your values, then you probably feel pretty good about yourself and whatever you're doing, because you can justify that. Like, it's an easy decision. It's above the line, it's below the line. And if I'm trying to get better, if I'm trying to reach a new pinnacle of my life, then what actions am I doing? And are they above the line or below the line for my personal values?
I love that. Okay. So here's a challenge, and we could talk about it together, right? Because I think it's important, because you mentioned imposter syndrome, and that's prevalent. Anyone who believes that they are destined to achieve more goes through that.
Yeah.
And my mentor even said that, he's talked to other very successful individuals, and they have said that it doesn't really ever go away, and I can see how that can be true, because I also believe that fear doesn't necessarily go away. It just doesn't stick around as long once you acknowledge it for what it is. So maybe imposter syndrome is the same. So where does imposter syndrome then play with values, right? Because that's a great strategy, right? Like living above the line, so to speak. But when you're experiencing imposter syndrome and you're not feeling good enough to live by those values, what do you do then? What's a direction that you can go that can support you in getting up there?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Let me think about that one for a bit. The biggest thing that I'm always talking about with imposter syndrome is taking action, but also how do you gain a little bit of confidence is maybe looking back at the past. And where have you had success is, and whether it's, I have something I call the scar jar, right? So I'll have students, like, you get scars, right? All of your body from whatever you do, the war wounds, whatever you want to call them. I'll have teams that I work with, I'll have them write down a scar, something that happened in the past that was really devastating or hard for them to get past, that they felt like just awful about, and I'll have them write it down and then put it in a clear jar so they can see it. And so then they look at it and they're like, oh, well, this happened 5 years ago. I survived it.
Yeah.
I can get through what I'm trying to get through now. So maybe it's looking at some success from the past to build up that maybe something relates to what they're trying to do that's new with their venture. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like that. I think looking like for me, the way I interpret that is you're looking at absolute reference points, right? Of your worst experiences that you didn't think you could survive, right? Yeah, and we've all had them at some point, right? Like, would we survive college? Would we survive our first job interview? Would we survive our marriage? Would we survive, having our first kid? Whatever it might be, whatever it might be, we've had that at some point. And we're standing, we're breathing, we're somewhat sane, so we survived it, right? And so I think those absolute reference points are so key, because in that state of not feeling good enough, it's very easy to look at immediate reference points and find evidence that can prove you not being good enough to be true, especially if you're in the comparison zone, right? Compare yourself to other people, which I imagine can be good and challenging when you're on a team.
Yeah.
Right. But I think also what you said the first time, which is always simple, right? It's action. And I always sign on to the 1% rule, right? Which is like, if you could spend 15 minutes doing one thing outside of your comfort zone, right? Over time, it compounds and it has an effect. And I think it's so important. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, really. And so, so here's a question, and this is more directed towards you, imposter syndrome, because we've all experienced it, right? I shared a little bit with you even before the call, before we went live, about my journey getting back to wingman and how that was just a big journey of not feeling like I could do what I do under that banner, give myself permission. When was kind of your most challenging time having to overcome imposter syndrome?
I would give you two. One was 2 months ago, and one was 13 years ago, which is why I reached out to you, right? So I had some confidence issues because I had a blood clot, some serious health issues, and in my early 40s, and getting back on my feet with the confidence was a challenge, and for whatever reason that was holding me back, it was holding me back, and I didn't feel like I was good enough to be out in the dating world and all of that. So that was a big piece at the time. And then most recently is transitioning from being a Hall of Fame volleyball coach to a mental performance coach. Now it's two coaches, but it's two different worlds. And like I shared with you, I'm working with some younger kids at a club, so I'm still comfortable doing lessons at volleyball.
Yeah.
But when I go out in public, like, I'm good with speaking, but I'm trying to make sure that I'm not the volleyball coach, I'm the mental performance coach, and that can be a little bit unnerving for me. You feel some things creep in, and so you just kind of settle them. You appreciate them for what they are, and that's it's good, because something's good is going to happen from that feeling. It's just getting used to it. So that's my most recent one for sure.
Yeah. It's like, I think you and I parallel that, right? But I like what you said at the end, right? It's like, when you feel these things or notice these things, that something is good on the other side. Like, how did you train yourself to convince yourself that that's the program? Like, how did that soundtrack get embedded in your mind to know that it's okay? Because for a lot of people, when they're making that transition, I mean, listen, I was doing dating coaching for the better part of 14 years. I've been coaching for 15 now. So this is more like kind of my first year into going beyond that. But people still know me as, the dating guy, right? Yeah. And it's fine, but I'm not that guy, right? But they know me as that, and that makes sense. But I've been doing that for 14, 15 years. You've been doing it for almost 3 decades. So how do you mentally shift the embedding of that program, right? Because that's been correct me if I'm wrong when I say this, right? But this has been your identity for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Most of your adult, if not all of your adult life. So, what are some of the things that you've done for yourself to make that shift?
I've had people remind me to say, listen to your own advice. And, because this is what I coach athletes.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so make the shift. Like, this is who you are. You can go out and do this. And I'm encouraging and supporting and doing all that. But it's believing in yourself that you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife has said to me all the time, when I'm feeling a little anxious on this, she's like, just take your own advice. Who are you? And then it's either your self-talk or maybe it's just your body posture, whatever, like just some adjustments.
Yeah.
Taking that breath and you're like, yeah, all right, let's do this. And kind of going from there. So it's having people, my friends, I say my coworkers, I still work with a lot of my alumni because they're in the volleyball realm. Like I'll call them up. I'm like, hey, give me something. They're like, take your advice. I'm like, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So that has been good. Like the support system of having that close community that get what I'm trying to do. Being able to just be vulnerable with them and saying like, I'm feeling something here. And they're like, just listen to what you tell people. Take your own advice. All right. That's help for me. I'm not going to say it's going to help for everybody, but it's help for me.
Yeah. Well, we also give support, right, and advice. And so naturally we have that in our archives and we just, we give it to everyone else. Sometimes we don't give it to ourselves just nearly as much. Right. So getting that reminder that we can use those things for ourselves is super important, like practicing what I preach has become something that has been really important to me. And it's not because I've swayed from that per se, but it's just important, like why would I give someone advice that I either haven't applied or, haven't seen work myself. Right. And that was kind of how we went, right? Like there was nothing that I ever gave you or told you or advised you to do that like I wasn't willing to do myself, haven't done myself, or have seen work. And it made it easier for you to manage and know that like you weren't trying to pull off the impossible.
Right. And I trusted it because you practice what you preach.
Yeah. Yeah, because you saw me demonstrate many times when we were out there. So.
Yeah, that trust allowed me to be able to move forward. If I didn't have that trust in you, I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, which makes sense. So we talked about the high of getting to the Hall of Fame. It doesn't have to be sports related, right? Career related, but if it is, you feel free to share it. But like. Mental performance is so key, right? Especially when getting to the peak, but also when we're in the pit, right? We're in the dark. What was kind of a memorable time where you felt not at your best? And, what was kind of your journey to get back?
I think for me, I think there's a few things. I think, like I said, having that blood clot when we first met, having that health issue, really was a tough point in my life where I felt just really bottom of the barrel. And I think the biggest thing I learned from it, amongst all the other things from you, is that things on the other side, things that really you feel like you're at your lowest, it's like having a losing record. Like you went 0 for 21, right? So there's no way to go but up.
Yeah.
And I think once I was able to kind of shift that mindset to saying like, all right, it got ugly, so now let's make it awesome. Like that kind of put the wheels, kind of in gear. And I think being a competitive person, you then start to set the goals or have a vision, and then you start chugging away at it and trying to chip away at different pieces of it. But it's the realization of like, okay, enough with the woe is me thing, and let's see what I can change, because this is a low. So there's got to be something that I can get to that will make things better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember we got together, you were even just starting to get back into volleyball shape, right? And like going and going on trips to play. And even that was like a big deal for you at the time because you weren't even sure if you'd be able to get back to being able to play like that, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think as a player, it's funny because I always brag about this to my alumni because a couple of them were in the tournament, but there was an invitation only beach volleyball tournament. I played in it when I was 44. So this was a couple of years after the clot.
Yeah.
And I ended up taking third. And it was like invitation only for like, so pretty high level of players.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of my alumni were playing too. So I kind of let them know.
I love it.
But
it's so good, man. Yeah. Everyone loves a comeback story, man.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. You know, and I tell them, well, why can't you have your own, right? Why can't it be yours?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, for me, like this transition from being a volleyball coach to a mental performance coach. Now I've been doing mental performance with my teams for 15 years, 20 years. And I've been doing this as a side business for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But I consider this a comeback. Like I was at the peak of coaching and now I'm trying to build something. So this for me is like a kind of a comeback for me. Like I want to get back to where I was and be just a very big influence in people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's two directions I can go with that one. I love it. Like I didn't think of it this way until you mentioned it, but like, why not create what is the equivalent of a Hall of Fame career in what we do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, why can't we? You know, I look at someone like Tony Robbins, right? If anyone hears that, tell him I said his name. But he's someone that, you know, he's been doing this for 47 years, 48 years, right? It's amazing to have someone do what he does or do what anyone does for that long, right? It's incredible. And he certainly would be considered on the Mount Rushmore, you know, Hall of Fame career, if there's such a thing. And I aspire to that level, not to be like him, but to be on Mount Rushmore when this is all said and done, you know? Yeah. But yeah, like why not create that for ourselves, you know? Absolutely. So that was the first thought that came over my mind. And the other thought was just like legacy, right? Next generation, kids, development. So with what you're doing now, right, with CCK Mental Performance, how are you seeing now that, you know, with the kids that you're working with now or looking to work with?
For me, I mean, COVID was a thing, right?
Yeah, let's call it out, guys. Like it happened. We also call it the blip for those of you who are in the know.
Yes. And there's a ton of kids that are just still lost from confidence, self-belief, whatever happened. And I look at that just like with a broken heart. And I look at that I also look at the world today and go, we need just a crap ton more leaders. And who better to teach leadership than a coach? And one of my strengths was teaching leadership. And I just feel like I can make way more of an impact in the world with the youth and helping them understand of how much of an impact they can actually be at a young age if they had the confidence to be able to go out and do it. And whether that's in the sports world or the real world, it doesn't really matter, because for me, working with athletes, it's all, whatever I teach them is all going to translate for them into the real world. And so I think that's kind of what I'm trying to hit. Like my mission's to you know, educate and make as many leaders as I possibly can, you know, in the next 10 years. So just being able to have conversations about what your goals are and how you're going to accomplish that and getting them to think a little bit more, like that's for me is really a good first step. So that my legacy is trying to really just build that up. That will be hopefully when I look back after this, after 10 years or 20 years, and look down and back at what's going on, what I did. Hopefully that's what was accomplished.
Yeah, you're right, man. they are leaders. I think it's weird. It's kind of weird to say. I don't even know if I'm going to say this properly, but like, I feel like there are enough leaders right now. They're just terrible leaders. They're terrible leaders. And there's leaders in not in the right positions of leadership, you know?
Yeah.
Their skill sets may have gotten them there, you know, but probably in the wrong positions. And if they were like, if a real coach came in and put them in the right positions to win, maybe there'd be a difference, right? But I also do agree with the other part of like, this next generation, they're going to be ones left with whatever the world looks like when we pass on, right? And there needs to be leaders within that culture who can step up and actually make meaningful change for the next generation, you know? And I think confidence, I think if I were to pinpoint the two biggest issues of, you know, I guess millennials, maybe not millennials, Gen Z, it's confidence and empathy.
Yeah.
You know, I think those two are the biggest issues I can point to, you know? Yeah, you agree with that?
Absolutely. My leadership, it's interesting you say it because my leadership program is named Q Leadership for communication, understanding, and empathy. And that basically is the same what you just said. Like, I just feel like it's lacking.
Yeah.
And it's kind of gross. It's hard to see. And so the more people can understand what those three things kind of tie in together, but the empathy piece it's definitely missing.
Yeah, I feel like it's the key. I feel like it's the key that brings it together, because empathy requires not just listening, but understanding, right? And we live in such a polarizing world, which, by the way, I actually embrace polarity. I think polarity does make a difference. It gets attention. And if you're doing it right for the right reasons, it's what you want. However, it doesn't mean that being polarizing means that you're not open to alternative or other ideas. I think the openness to be able to hear where someone's coming from is so important, because that's what allows us to be connected.
Yeah.
And relatable. And by the way, I also believe that empathy is a key factor in increasing self-esteem and confidence, because when you're understood and someone is willing to hold space and listen to you, it feels good. Yeah. Right? It feels good. And you build your self-esteem about yourself, because if someone's acknowledging you, or just, being able to acknowledge you for who you are and where you're at, you feel a sense of belonging and a connection that you otherwise wouldn't get if someone wasn't holding space for you or not willing to acknowledge you for whatever ideas you may have.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's definitely hits home.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, so I just love that. I just love that that's something that's a key part of what you're doing with the kids, which is awesome. For those who are jumping in, checking this out, it's good to see you guys here. I'm with Coach Craig Kolek, Hall of Fame coach and founder of CCK Mental Performance. We're just talking about all kinds of things. Talk about performance, mental performance. We talked a little bit about just different ways of taking action, overcoming imposter syndrome, everything in between. So now you're kind of in this transition, and you have more time. Obviously, the hustle is to build the business. I mean, what are some other things that you're up to now that you have the space to kind of maybe not necessarily reassess values, but you're kind of in this place where you're recreating the next version of Coach Craig, right? So, what are some things that you've been kind of working on and getting yourself into?
Well, one, it's making sure that my family is still my family, right? So still trying to spend a lot of quality time with my wife and my son.
Yeah.
It's a big piece. I think two is health. You get into a rut a little bit, and I got into a little bit of rut where I wasn't working out as much and wasn't doing as much, some injuries and things like that. And I think I'm starting to feel a little bit better. So my main focus has been trying to get that going as well. And then the other things is just I'm trying to read as many books as I can and just educate myself on how I can help.
Nice.
And so I was never a big reader. So this is new. And my wife kind of looks at me like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Reading." She's like, "What do you mean?" So yeah. So there's been a few things.
Yeah. What are you reading right now?
Right now I am reading John Gordon's leadership book.
Okay.
Which is good. A lot of the stuff I'll follow. He's into the performance, the positive performance type of mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and so that a lot of things kind of lend to what I talk about. So it's good. It's kind of hear what he does and what his beliefs are with that. So that's one that I've read. Manifestation. So is one that what's the name of the book? I'm going to forget it. 7 Steps to Manifestation, something like that. It was pretty good. Like it. And that's one I actually read within about a week. Just because there's a lot of stuff in there that, again, hits home with what I believe and kind of what I teach.
Yeah.
And so that was really good too. So those are 2 that I've been into. I just picked up 80-20. Is it 80-20? 80-20? 80-20 your life, or
Using the Pareto principle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read that yet, but
Okay. Yeah.
How about you? Books?
Yeah. Right now, well, recently I finished actually Coaching for Performance, which was a solid book. It talks more, it uses the business side as a reference, but I apply it to everything, because they have cool models in there that I think are really good. Another book, let me just pull up the easiest way to do it is pull up my Audible. John Acuff Soundtracks is a good one too. The Power, is it the Habit Loop? The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg is another one. And then the one I'm going to read next, where is it? Is The Wealth Money Can't Buy, which is Raman Sharma.
Oh yeah. I've heard of that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I like right now I'm in the phase of reading a lot of books around prosperity and kind of deep within, internal, the internal game, so to speak. Yeah. Those kind of books right now I'm really into, because I think externally life is pretty good. Internally life is good too, but I want to spend more time internally connecting, right? Than feeling like I'm chasing after something all the time externally. Just because you said when you have the competitive gene, you're always shooting for the best.
Right.
And I've noticed at times it can be a little distracting, right? At times from connecting with myself and my soul and my values.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that you brought up the values part, because I think it's so important. When I work with my clients, we talk about that. And I use various like assessments that kind of bring up what their core values are. And we talk about it, because those values can empower you or they can limit you, depending on how you look at it and how you use it. So it's just a big part of creating that culture that you talked about.
I'm working with 14-year-olds right now talking about their values,
Yeah.
They don't have a clue when I start, but they talk to their parents a little bit. Now they got some communication going on with them, and like it's powerful.
It's super powerful, man. And like I think, when we talk about, it's great that you talk about this, because I think as a family unit, I don't think it's ever too early to talk about values as a family. We talk about values with our daughter all the time. She's 7. She intuitively knows our values. She may challenge them, but I think any kid would, right? Because the values that we instill upon her needs to become her version of that. So we empower that in as much as we possibly can. But I'm a big proponent of having, the parents really talk about values at an early age,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We do the same thing with, my son being just about 5, same thing. Like we talk about kindness and, all those things that you being kind to your teacher. And he's like, yeah.
Yeah. Like they know it intuitively, right? And I think sometimes kids are like, why are you teaching this? I already know, like
Yeah.
intuitively.
Yeah.
So so I give my daughter a lot of space around that because she really does know. She's such a very compassionate person. And we actually before bed this week, I was putting her to bed. We actually talked about the value of compassion, and
Nice.
one of her wilderness schools that she went to, she got the Compassion Award, and
Yeah.
she got a little rock and it says compassion on it. And we talk about it every once in a while because she doesn't necessarily know the dictionary meaning of compassion, but she knows when she's being compassionate.
Yeah.
And she also knows when she's not.
Wow.
Right. And that part is key to know the difference, right?
Yeah.
And then she can choose to not be compassionate, right? She has autonomy to do that. And I think it's up to me and my wife to show her what happens when we make those choices, right?
Yeah.
When we don't live in our values and what happens when we do live in our values, just to have that awareness. She's still going to choose at the end of the day, right? But to have that awareness, I think, is so key. So it's so cool that you're getting them into that at that age.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You as well, your daughter. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, man. We got a little bit of time. Like, so, you're almost 5 years in, what are some of the best things of being a dad?
I have a picture on my phone of Owens, my son, who he climbed this tall playground structure to go up the tallest slide, right? It's an enclosed slide, which he's never done before. And so you could tell he was a little hesitant, and he did it on his own. Like I was just kind of back a lot, sitting back watching him as he was playing, and he decided he was going to go up, and he went down. I videoed it, and I got the very end of him coming out of the slide, and he just came out, jumped up with so much joy on his face.
Yeah.
And I have the picture of him with that shot. And so that's my wallpaper. And it is like, for me, every time I look at it, like that joy is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best part. And he just says some things that just makes me laugh, and it makes me cry too, and some other things. But what comes out of his mouth is just pretty funny. Being able to start doing things with him, doing some sports, and just watching him grow, like watching him just, they're smart as can be at that age, and it's amazing at how much they pick up. And I'm like, I don't think I was ever that smart, even now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's unreal. So I think just enjoying the process of having a 5-year-old son is the best thing about fatherhood, And, I got to have him on the bench with me during a couple of my last games, and he's just eating. He has no idea what's going on, but it was cool as I was coaching. He was kind of like right there, so that was cool. So I think just activities with him is great, and just seeing the growth, but still keeping him 5. Like, let's not get him any older. Let's freeze that for a couple of years.
Yeah, right. It happens so fast, right? Like, and it's surprising, right? Like, you never know when they're going to take that leap.
Yeah.
Right. So Owen climbing that, up to go down the big slide. I had my version of that a few years ago, watching her do that, and facing other fears, right? And I don't know. And it's interesting because even I use that, and I use air quotes. So if you're listening, I'm using air quotes around fears, because when I watch my kid, it's hard to tell what she's really afraid of. Like, I think most of the time she's curious.
Yeah.
She's not scared because she has no frame of reference to know that she should be scared of something, right?
Yeah.
Now, if something appears dangerous, then she will have her reluctance, right? And that makes sense, because now she can understand the difference between something that's dangerous and something that is fear, but probably just internal, right? But to see her like work through it is amazing, you know? And then all of a sudden, once she does it once, it's like she's done it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Right. Like it just, you know,
Yeah. That's when she gives you a dad, I know how to do it.
yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. She's like, Dad, I know. Like, don't tell me. I know. Like, I remember it was last month? Last month we were in, we're Boston, we were in Canton visiting friends and family, and mostly family. And she wanted to, there was a, you know, baseball and bat. It was like a wiffle ball and bat. And she was like, she wanted me to throw it to her. She hadn't swung. I've never seen her swing a bat, right? Never, you know? So I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, so I'll show you how to hold. She's like, Dad, don't, let me do it. So I'm like, all right. And I threw it and she hit it and I had to move out of the way because it came right back at me. And I'm just amazed. And she's like, let's do it again. And we're doing it. And she's making, I mean, if she's swinging, she's making contact, right? Yeah. Unless I'm throwing a bad pitch, right? I'll take the blame for that. But I mean, I was just so impressed, not just from the hand-eye coordination. I mean, that's always impressive when you're seeing that happen, but just like her willingness to jump in and the joy of her knowing that she's doing something that is like really fun and exciting and she's doing it well.
Yeah.
Right? It's so cool. It's so cool.
It's awesome. And that brings me to a question for you. So we talked about the joy of being a child, right? Being a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, and just doing something for the first time, or just doing something that they really love and just seeing the joy in their face.
Yeah.
What happens when they lose that? So let's say, so my question for you is, how do you get that back, right? So you're working, because you work with a lot of people, and this is kind of what happens, right? You lose that joy. So what's the step that you do to try to bring that joy back to adults?
That's such a great question, bro. I'll tell you what I did and what led me to then helping other clients do this. That same wonder, like you were talking, you're kind of watching your son and he's doing things and he's just growing in front of your eyes, right? Like you go away for 8 hours, you come back, you're like, who is this person? Like you're completely different than when I left you this morning. Like that happens on a regular basis. And I remember watching this happen day after day. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, when did I stop growing? Right? Like, let alone that fast, but like, when did I stop like developing? Like, when is there a day where I've come home and I look and behave different than when I left the house?
Nice. Yes.
You know? And it just it just penetrated my brain and my soul in such a deep way. And I was like, I got to find out what happened. What happened? And so I spent multiple days just watching my daughter do all kinds of stuff, right? She's not really doing anything other than play. But inside the playing, she's creating worlds, she's creating characters, she's telling, it's like she's almost like verbally storytelling like a sitcom, right? That's like going on in her mind. And she's playing out all these scenes and she's constructing and she's singing and dancing and eating. Even when she's eating, she's playing. She's making a mess, but she's playing. Like she's having so much fun doing everything in her life. Even when she goes to pee, she's singing. And she's like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it just hit me. I was like, at some point in my life, probably around maybe 22, 23 years old, I stopped playing.
Yep.
I started to take life really seriously because the pressure was put onto me to do so. If I don't take life seriously, I'm going to be broke. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be, single and lonely and all these things, right? Like all these terrible things were going to happen. Well, the truth is I got successful and I got the girl and I got the life and I still felt all those things. Yeah. So when I'm watching my daughter do this, I'm like, I need to bring back play into my life. And me being very deeply intellectual, like I can't just accept it from there. I got to go down the rabbit hole. Like I did all this research around play and mental performance and all these other things. And I realized, and this is what I say about play. Play is an elite form of mindfulness. I think play is one of the few things that we have in this world that can activate parts of our brain that we can't do in any other way. Right. And like, people, so for example, people who play sports, many of them are insanely intelligent because the amount of data they have to collect and remember about certain athletes, certain plays, playbooks, game situations, different teams that they're playing against, right? Like, people neglect how smart many athletes are. And it's because they're using their capacity to play to activate parts of their brain that can allow them to achieve higher performance.
Yeah.
But what's really cool about play is that it brings a level of connectivity, both on a social but also a spiritual level. And so I had to completely reformat my life and really focus it around play. This was kind of when I went away from wingman into what everyone knows as the one-up effect, right? We talked about that a little bit before I went and talked to the student athletes at Riv that time, right? By the way, the book is coming out. It's going to be under a different title, but it's coming.
Nice.
Yes. And yeah, so then when that came about, it kind of transformed things for me. And now what I do is play is a big component of how I, help my clients, because it's the only way to activate a part of their brains that has probably been dormant for a very long time.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's when people learn the most. When you think about mammals, their development is all based on social and play. So,
man, you did go deep down the rabbit hole. Huh?
Yeah, I did, man.
That's amazing. Like, it's so true when you, like, me hearing that and hearing the psychological piece of it and the mental piece of it, like, and you think about it, you digest it, and it's like it nails everything right on the head. And the first thing that I think about it for me as a coach, when you were just saying that whole thing, and I'm like, wow, I have not thought about this until right now. That the way I coach my teams is through as much games as I can. Practices are games, drills are games, warm-ups are games, like everything is games. And I would tell recruits, like, they ask you, like, what's your practice like, blah, blah, blah. And I say, like, I try to make it as game-like as possible.
Yeah.
And I literally just thought about this right now as you were going through what you were just talking about. So that's pretty crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, the idea behind the one-up effect is that you can gamify anything. And if you are able to create a game design, and the gamified part is like the reward. Like, when you win the game, there's a reward, there's a payoff that you get, right? But but you have to design the game first. And it has to be a game that you want to win. Not that you necessarily can win, but it's a game that you want to win, right? Because you can coach your team and have a hell of a practice week, but once they get on the court, like, you can coach their way, but there's no true guarantee that they're going to win unless you know that the other team is terrible, right? Right? But like, there's a game but they want to win that game, right? And that is the piece, right? That is the piece that we need, I think, for anyone who's listening. If there's anything you take away from this, is there has to be a game that you want to play, because whether or not you win, it becomes irrelevant. You're going to enjoy playing the game because it's going to teach you something about yourself that you're wanting to know. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned watching my kid. She has fun because she's learning about herself. She's learning about life. And as she gets the feedback from life and from other things, she's growing and developing at a rate that we would think is completely ridiculous, but we were once kids too, and we grew that fast. So my question became, well, why can't I do that now? Right? Like, why can't we, as adults in our mid-age, right? Why can't we grow that fast as well, even now?
Yeah.
Every day I'm challenging that. I'm challenging that notion that I can't grow as fast as my daughter, And
that's cool. That's cool. And
Yeah.
For me too, like, working with my clients with the mental performance side of things, a lot of it is about burnout, and it's not just about lack of confidence and self-belief. A lot of it is burnout and not having fun at their sport because they've been grinding at it for so long. So, like, how do I make it anti-grind for them so it's fun?
Exactly.
And the conversation is, how do we make this fun again for you, right? So
Yeah,
It is. It comes full through. We could have like probably hours of conversation on this one.
for sure, man. We will for sure multiple times outside the podcast. But I love that we were able to kind of conclude on that. It's just so good to catch up with you and to see you, and I'm so pumped for the next chapter for you. I think what you're doing has been in the works for a while. Like, you've been doing this for 2 years, but you and I had talked before, and that this part was always in you. So I'm just so glad you're stepping out and you're making it happen, man. It's
Thank
really
you, man.
awesome. And I know the kids that you've worked with in the past. I've met some of them, and I know that, and the kids that you're going to work with in the future, they're just going to be so better off having you in their lives, So thank you for doing that work.
I really appreciate that. But I love you, man. I appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you? How can they reach out and follow you and learn more about what you're doing to help everyone?
For the best way to get a hold of me, to kind of follow my stuff, I'm pretty vivid on Instagram's kind of my platform that I like to kind of post all kinds of different things as much as I can. So it's at Coach Craig Kolek. There you go. My Facebook page is CCK Mental Performance Training, and as well as my website as well. But Instagram's probably the biggest one I'm really active on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, brother. I will. We'll talk a little bit more after this, so you stick around. We'll pull you off. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Please subscribe, share. I'm going to be doing a lot more podcasts. I have one that is coming up. Actually, I have two coming up. One is with a world champion. I'm not going to tell you in what, but he is a multiple-time world champion. You won't want to miss that one. And then I have another one with someone who is one of my best friends, an exceptional, talented individual, and someone who, if there's anyone who knows more about the one-up effect and its origins, it's this man. He was client number 0. He goes that far back, and I'm excited to introduce him. So please subscribe. It'll get notified when these episodes go on. And if you need any additional support, feel free to reach out to me, post in the chat, or you can go to theprofessionalwingman.com. That's where I'm at everywhere. Until next time, I want you to stay active and be iconic.